Across the streets of Harlem, in the neighborhoods of Brixton, in the favelas of Brazil, and on the blocks of Toronto, the diaspora is rising with pride. Why? Because Africa itself is rising. For centuries, Africans abroad were told that their homeland was weak, colonized, exploited, and controlled. But today, from the deserts of Mali to the fields of Burkina Faso, from Niger's uranium mines to the Sahel's frontline, Africa is no longer bowing. The continent is standing tall, rejecting foreign dominance, building unity, and shaking the very foundations of global power. And the diaspora, scattered across the world, is watching this uprising with tears of pride and fists in the air. Because Africa's liberation is their liberation. This is not just Africa's fight. It is a global black fight, a Pan-African awakening, and the world will never be the same. The weight of history. For centuries, Africa was treated like a prize to be looted. Colonizers drew lines across maps, stealing resources, enslaving people, and leaving scars that still bleed today. The diaspora, the millions of Africans scattered through slavery, migrations, and exile, grew up under the shadow of those scars. They were told to be ashamed of Africa. Western schools showed only starving children, warlords, and poverty when Africa was mentioned. Generations of black kids in New York, London, and Paris grew up asking, if Africa is so rich, why is it so poor? And the answer, hidden in the silence of textbooks, was colonialism, neocolonialism, and exploitation. But today, Africa is rewriting that answer. Today, the narrative has changed. The spark in the Sahel, in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, countries long dismissed as unstable, a new fire has been lit. These nations, scarred by decades of French military presence and economic domination, have stood up and said, enough. Burkina Faso, under Captain Ibrahim Traoré, declared independence not just in words, but in action. Mali expelled French troops and invited new partners on its own terms. Niger, once the world's uranium supplier under French exploitation, is now reclaiming control over its resources. Together, these nations formed the Alliance of Sahel States, OAS, a bold union that challenges centuries of foreign interference. The diaspora sees this and feels goosebumps, because it is not just three countries resisting. It is the spirit of an entire continent refusing to kneel. Why the diaspora cares so deeply? The African diaspora has always carried a dual struggle: the fight against racism abroad and the longing for dignity at home. When Africa rises, it shatters the lie that black people are powerless. It strengthens the soul of every African-descended person living under discrimination in the West. When a young black man in Chicago sees Ibrahim Traoré defy France, he feels that defiance in his bones. When a Caribbean student in London sees Mali stand tall, she walks taller in her own world. The diaspora's pride is not abstract. It is personal. It is spiritual. It is healing centuries of generational trauma. Echoes of Sankara. Traoré in Burkina Faso often invokes the memory of Thomas Sankara, the revolutionary who once said, "He who feeds you controls you." Sankara was assassinated, but his ideas never died. They lived in the whispers of diaspora elders, in the books of Pan-Africanists, in the songs of reggae and hip-hop. Today, when young leaders in Africa carry Sankara's torch, the diaspora feels like his spirit has been resurrected. And for the first time in decades, the dream of true Pan-African unity doesn't feel impossible. It feels alive, breaking the chains of France. France has long been the symbol of neocolonial control in Africa. Through the CFA franc currency, through military bases, through resource exploitation, Paris maintained a grip on its former colonies. But the uprisings in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso ripped those chains apart. When Niger stopped uranium exports to France, It was more than economics. It was psychological warfare. It was the act of a nation saying, "We no longer power your lights while our people remain in the dark." The diaspora erupted with pride. For every African American who remembers Jim Crow, for every Afro-Caribbean who remembers plantation slavery, for every African in Europe who feels like a second-class citizen, Africa's resistance is vindication. Pan-Africanism reborn. For decades, Pan-Africanism was dismissed as a dream of the past. The diaspora kept the idea alive in art, music, and activism, but many wondered if Africa itself had given up on it. Now, with the AES alliance, with growing cooperation between African states, and with bold leaders rejecting colonial dictates, Pan-Africanism is breathing again. This is why the diaspora is proud, because for the first time in generations, Africa is not waiting for handouts. It is building its own destiny. The global shockwaves. Make no mistake. The world is watching. Western governments are nervous because Africa's uprising threatens the very system that enriched Europe and America for centuries. If Africa controls its own resources, if Africa builds its own alliances, if Africa speaks with one voice, global power shifts. The diaspora sees these shockwaves not as a threat, but as hope, because a strong Africa means a stronger diaspora. It means that no black child in the world will ever again have to bow their head in shame when someone mocks Africa. Diaspora responsibility. But pride alone is not enough. The diaspora also feels a responsibility to invest in Africa, to connect with Africa, to defend Africa from propaganda and attacks, to bridge the gap between continents. Because this uprising is not just Africa's story. It is a global black story. The future Africa is building. Imagine an Africa where uranium powers African cities, not Europe. Imagine an Africa where gold builds African wealth, not foreign banks. Imagine an Africa where the diaspora returns not as refugees of racism, but as builders of a global black powerhouse. Help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Please like, subscribe, and comment to support this channel. This is the dream the uprisings are planting in the hearts of the diaspora. The final word. The diaspora is proud of Africa's uprising because it is more than politics. It is a spiritual resurrection. It is the breaking of chains, the healing of wounds, the rewriting of history. It is Africa declaring to the world, "We are no longer your victims. We are our own liberators." And as the diaspora watches, they don't just see Africa. They see themselves. They see their ancestors smiling. They see their children's future glowing. And they whisper with pride, "Africa is rising and so are we."